How to Introduce Your Husband to Your Super Serious Crime-Fighting Group by A. Hamilton. Chapter 3. Clark liked monitor duty with Arthur. They were both attentive to what was going on. There wasn't any food being tossed around, despite the fact that food wasn't allowed in this room. There was no urge to fill the silence with talking. It was peaceful. So Clark wasn't exactly sure why today was different. "I just thought you'd be married to Batman." Well, no, he knew why today was different. He just didn't know why it was happening now instead of any time in the past 2.5 months, since his identity, and subsequent marriage, reveal. "Really?" Clark laughed. "Why?" "You always seem to understand each other better than anyone else can. Batman won't ask for help from anyone else but you, and you're obviously always inclined to do the same. But you're more normal about it." Clark chuckled. "I mean," Arthur continued, "if anyone else were to stand within 6 feet of him, he would glare at them until they backed up. But with you, it's different. It's not that he barely tolerates your company, either. I mean, he really does go looking for it." Clark schooled his features into pure confusion, giving away none of the glee he felt over the fact that Bruce, Mr. "I regulate my heartbeat so well, even my superpowered husband can't always tell when I'm lying," was apparently unable to fully control his body language around him. "So, you're saying, what? That B has feelings for me?" Arthur hesitated, clearly unwilling to overstep. "Well, I know he's more comfortable with you than anyone else, including Diana." He raises his hand up in surrender. "And all I'm saying is that there might be something to that. We have been working together for way longer than the Justice League has existed." "Well, yes, but you think I'd say the same thing if it were Hal Jordan instead of you." Clark snorted and conceded the point. They fell back into the comfortable silence that monitor duty with Arthur was usually characterized by. It was never hard to separate Batman and Bruce in his mind. Not in the way that he thought they were two entirely different people, but in the way that, while Clark Kent and Bruce Wayne were married, Superman and Batman were not. From the very beginning, Bruce had made it clear that this thing between them could never come at the cost of their jobs, which, to Batman, meant that there would be absolutely nothing between Superman and Batman beyond a professional partnership. And friendship, Clark had added. Bruce had scoffed, but hadn't argued. A decade in, and Clark was pretty confident they'd done a good job of keeping boundaries up. There was no PDA, no flirting. They had separate rooms on the Watchtower, and they tried not to let professional disagreements affect their personal life, and vice versa. Except, apparently, they weren't as subtle as they thought. If Arthur Curry, of all people, thought it was his duty to bring up the fact that Superman may or may not be breaking Batman's heart, he'd expect this level of gossip from some of the other members, like Barry and Hal. But Arthur? Maybe this was more serious than he'd thought. "We need to talk," was the first thing Clark said when he opened the door to Bruce's study. 10 years ago, those words would have made Bruce shut off completely. 10 years ago, Clark hadn't exactly known that there was really only one way a conversation that started with those words was expected to go. They'd reached a compromise over the years. Clark would only use that phrase when he needed Bruce's undivided attention for a conversation, and Bruce would stop assuming the worst whenever he heard it. As it stood now, Bruce just put his pen down and raised an eyebrow. Clark dropped into the seat on the other side of the desk. "Arthur thinks Batman is in love with Superman." "Okay," Bruce said after a pause. "Okay? That's it? What do you want me to say?" "Well, I don't know. It's just that this seems to be going further than we thought." "What do you mean?" "Well, when we started the whole Brucie and Justice League thing, I thought, that there would be no complications because Superman could be married to whoever he wanted with no repercussions for your identity. But now, it seems like the team is convinced that I'm hurting you because my husband keeps coming over to the Watchtower while Batman's just pining hopelessly away." "Brucie and the Justice League sounds like a kid's show," Bruce muttered. "Can you be serious?" Clark threw his hands in the air. "Fine. You said Arthur thought Batman was in love with Superman. But then you said the whole team did. Which is it?" Well, Arthur said he thought we were married, and Hal made vague allusions to Batman being my work husband. He brought his hands up to do air quotes. But you know Arthur. He wouldn't mention it unless it was obvious enough that he thought it was serious. And if it was obvious to him, you know the others have gossiped about it already. But what do you want me to do about it? I don't know. Clark sighed, taking his glasses off and rubbing a hand over his face. I don't know what you can do. I think if you just came straight out and said Batman wasn't in love with Superman, they'd think you're just in denial. Bruce paused for a moment. Then a slow, smug grin spread across his face. I think you're the one in denial. What? Clark said, squinting at him. Well, Batman is in love with you, Superman. Anyone can see it. The guy hangs on your every word. He looks at you like he never wants to look away. Bruce says, standing up and rounding the desk. Sure you're not projecting? Clark smirked. Bruce scoffed and slipped into his lap. Please. I have the real deal in my bed every night. All he's got are his fantasies. You can't distract me from the Batman issue, Clark said, although his eyes were already drifting down to B's mouth. Oh yeah. Bruce paused, a hair's breadth away from his lips. Wanna bet? The next time, Clark received a BW at WT text. He had just finished up dinner at a fish and chips place with Lois. They were waiting for the check when he heard his phone buzz on the table. He glanced at it and sighed. Bruce? Lois asked. He could never figure out how she always knew when it was Bruce. He'd ask, but she'd probably love the chance to go into detail about how disgustingly sappy his face got, even though he was pretty sure he'd grown out of that after 7 years of marriage. And he'd rather not give her the opportunity. Yeah, he's been doing a thing with our coworkers lately. A thing? She scrunched up her face in confusion. The waiter came by with their check, and Clark mouthed, "Later," across the table at her, before grabbing his wallet. A few minutes later, as they were walking down the street towards Lois's apartment, she nudged his arm. What thing? Clark sighed again. Well, you know how they've never really known the real him, right? Uh-huh. She'd known B's identity since the beginning. They never had a chance to hide it, between Clark's blatant pining over Batman and then his pure, unrestrained joy when he told her about his first date with Bruce Wayne. Bruce hadn't been happy, at first. He didn't like the idea that someone had figured out his identity without him having the chance to stop it. He came around soon enough, and the two of them quickly became a united force with the sole purpose of out-stubborning Clark's stubbornness. And remember how I told you that I shared my real name with them a few months ago? Well, it came up that I was married to Bruce, and now he's made it his goal to confuse them all by being both versions of himself. No! Lois gasped, delighted. How bad is it? You know him. He'll never do things halfway. Clark grumbled. Oh my god, I love him. He's such a menace. Is he doing it now? Is that why he texted you? Her eyes were wide, and Clark started to mirror her grin, no matter how annoyed he was trying to seem. Send me photos. Please, Clark. I don't know why the hell you've let me go this long without seeing the absolute chaos gremlin your husband tries to pretend he is not. See, this was probably why he hadn't told her before this. Because she and Bruce got along like a house on fire, and they'd always feed each other's flames, even when all Clark wanted to do was put them both in headlocks. Still, she'd probably pester him for 2 days straight before texting Bruce to have her request granted, if he said no right now. He sighed once more, and Lois's grin got impossibly wider. Fine. When he went up to the Watchtower after dropping Lois off at her apartment, everything seemed peaceful. Clark frowned. Brucie and peaceful did not go together. He was half expecting to be ambushed by a hyperactive husband as he rounded a corner. But everything was quiet. There were people talking in the common room, so he made a beeline towards it. Maybe Bruce had gone home? Clark hadn't taken more than 10 minutes to get up here, but maybe there was something going on in Gotham that he had to go and deal with. He walked into the room, catching sight of Bruce immediately. He was talking. Normally. Calmly. To Diana and Shayra. Arthur was rummaging through the fridge, and Ollie and Barry were on the couch, attempting to throw popcorn into their mouths. They had a pretty low success rate, judging by the mess on the carpet. Bruce's smile, which had previously been a more subdued version of his Brucie smile, but still not quite a Bruce smile, turned into something a lot softer when he caught sight of Clark. "Hey, babe," he said, reaching out his hand. Clark took it, allowing himself to be dragged close. "How was your day?" "Not bad," he said, dropping a kiss in his husband's hair. "Think I have enough to finish that article I told you about. The one about housing conditions for ex-convicts. I thought Perry wanted you to drop that. Perry wanted me to drop it in favor of writing about a museum opening. One of those is much more interesting than the other. Besides, Kat still owed me one, so I asked her to cover the museum piece for me." "Do you enjoy your job, Connell?" Diana asked. "Yeah, I do. It helps keep my mind occupied." Clark watched absently out of the corner of his eye as Bruce muttered an "excuse me" and pulled his phone out to send a text. "And I get to help people even more. Granted, in a less direct way, but sometimes it has bigger consequences. Superman can save a burning building, but Clark Kent can expose all the interior workings of a corrupt company and take it down with a single article. He's good at it, too." Bruce grinned up at him. "Luckily, he hasn't turned that huge brain of his into digging into my company. Who knows what he'd find?" He sent a wink over to Diana, and she rolled her eyes fondly. "What makes you think I haven't? You think I'd have gone out with you in the first place if I thought you were corrupt? It's been 10 years, Mr. Kent. Things change." He turned his body fully towards Clark and let go of his hand to tuck both arms around his waist and under his cape. "Oh, yeah." Clark draped an arm over his shoulders in return. "Think I should start digging now, then? See what shady dealings W.E. has been up to?" Bruce nosed at his jaw. Better not. Don't want to lose the best thing that's ever happened to me," he murmured. Fuck. 10 years. 10 years, and Clark could never fully shake the helpless shudders when Bruce got affectionate like that. He knew Bruce was expecting a quip like, "What? You mean W.E.? Or, "Don't let the kids hear that." But he just couldn't say it, when all his words felt like they were caught in his throat, right where Bruce's mouth was puffing warm breath onto his skin. Barry yelped from somewhere off to the side, and Clark snapped back to reality. "Right! The Watchtower! Work!" Diana and Shayra, who were currently looking at them with poorly concealed amusement. Clark cleared his throat and pushed Bruce away enough that one of his arms dropped from his waist. "So!" He cleared his throat again, wishing that would be enough to clear away the blush he knew was covering his face. "How have you two been?" Shayra launched into a story about something that happened on watch yesterday that looked like a drug deal, but turned out to be a surprise birthday party for a high school student, which then turned out to actually be a party where drugs were being used by underage teens, and how she had to call in a very confusing tip to the police, because she wasn't entirely sure what the situation was herself. The Zeta tube went off, and Clark instinctively latched onto the sound of Batman's footsteps. Oh gosh, Batman would not be pleased to see all the popcorn spilled on the floor. Wait. He froze, focusing his attention back on the footsteps. It was definitely Batman. He could hear the heavy thud of the boots, the slight scrape of metal joints, the fluttering of the cape. The breathing, however. Clark turned towards Bruce, saw him look over and raise his eyebrow a fraction of an inch, a tiny gesture that anyone would have missed had they not been keyed in to every slight twitch of his features. Clark interpreted it as, "What you gonna do about it?" "Bruce," he said, with a measured calm he did not feel. "Batman's coming." He left the unasked question in the air, knowing his husband well enough to be sure that he caught it anyways. "Bruce, why in the name of all that is good and holy is Batman coming?" Bruce's eyes widened comically, and he looked towards the door. "Batman? I haven't seen him since the last time I was kidnapped. What was that? 5 months ago?" Oh, Clark remembered that. He'd been helping out with search and rescue after an earthquake in Indonesia, and Dick had been caught up with a case in Bloodhaven, so Jason had had to step into the Batsuit. He'd spent the next few months gloating about it, and Bruce had grumbled about it every night when they went to bed. This wasn't Jason, though. Bruce refused to let him anywhere near the suit now. Something about him not respecting the sanctity of the Bat, whatever that meant. The footsteps stopped right at the doorframe, and Clark turned around to watch their oldest son take in every detail of the room. Dick's gaze swept over the two on the couch, the man leaning against the counter and eating cereal, the group of four looking back at him, and it froze on Bruce. "Superman, a word," Batman growled, after a pause. He turned on his heel and stalked out, not bothering to check if Superman was actually following. Clark sighed, pulling out of Bruce's grip and walking out the door. Dick stopped a few corridors down, far enough away that they couldn't be seen or heard. "I have no idea what's happening." "Yeah, me neither." "No, like seriously, what's happening? You must have some context. I just got a text from Bruce saying to go to the Watchtower as Batman, and he'd give me $500. I didn't think he'd be here." Clark groaned. "Okay, so basically I told everyone I was married to Bruce Wayne, and they asked if they could meet him. And I said, well, I don't remember what I said, but it was definitely not a yes. Except Bruce, being Bruce, took that to mean, of course I'll introduce my husband's annoying public persona, who I don't even get along with most of the time, to you, my incredibly serious crime-fighting group. And now he's doing things like this, where he'll parade around as Brucie and confuse everyone. And I keep hoping he'll get tired of it, but I think we both know that's not going to happen anytime soon." Dick took a moment to process his words, eyes narrowed in confusion behind the white lenses. "Okay, well, first of all," he began slowly, "I don't know who you're trying to bluff when you say, incredibly serious crime-fighting group, but it's not working. I just saw Barry Allen and Oliver Queen in that room, along with a truly insane amount of popcorn." Clark rolled his eyes. "Second of all, how much fun should I have with this?" Clark scrubbed both hands across his face and let out a noise that was half laugh, half sob. "He's giving you $500? Dick bobbed his head happily. "Row, okay. He'll never forgive me if I gave you $600 to leave now. And I don't even have that much anyways. You're literally married to... You know what? Screw it. Have as much fun as you want. I'll give you an extra $100 if you yell at him." He turned around and started back to the common room. Dick caught up to him and muttered, "This is the best day of my life," grin apparent in his voice. They walked back, side by side, stepping into the room and rejoining the group. Clark hooked his arm back over Bruce's shoulders. "Bruce Wayne," Batman ground out. "Batman! Why are you here?" "I came to say hi to my husband." "You live with him." "So?" "You have a job. In Gotham." Bruce scoffed. "I'm Bruce Wayne," he said, as though that explained everything. And surprisingly, it did. "You have a life. That is not here." "Keep going like this, and I'll start thinking you don't want me here." "I don't," Batman spat. But Bruce had already walked around them to the couch Barry and Ollie were on, wiggling his fingers at the popcorn bowl in silent question. Batman followed behind him and snatched his hand out of the bowl, before he could grab any. "Leave." Clark slid his phone out of the pocket in his suit, snapping a photo of the two of them, and sent it to Lois. "Who's that?" Bruce grinned, ignoring Batman completely. He knew that Clark wouldn't send potentially compromising photos to anyone outside of the pre-approved safe list, but Clark could still see the slight tension in his expression. "Lo." Bruce's face lit up. He made grabby hands for the phone, and Clark stepped forward and handed it over, with a roll of his eyes. He watched as Bruce opened up the camera and flipped it so he could see himself. He then started a video and bounced up and down on the balls of his feet, saying, "Lo, Lois, lo, guess what?" He flung an arm around Batman's neck and pulled him into the frame. "Batman's here!" Dick did an impressively accurate imitation of Bruce's growl and death glare, and raised a hand to shove his face away. Bruce laughed. "Oh, come on, Bats!" Batman whipped around to jab a finger in his chest. "Do not call me that," he snarled. "I let you in here because, for some godforsaken reason, my teammate seems to like you. Even though you're the lowest form of shit-eating invertebrate to ever crawl on this deplorable earth. And, for some reason, you've decided to leech onto the one thing that is good and right in this world, and, purely out of respect for him, I let you come up here, and no matter how much I want to drop-kick you into the Pacific Ocean and let you drown." The room went silent, the only sound being Dick's heavy breathing. Barry and Ollie were hiding behind the couch, mouths hanging open. Clark couldn't see Diana and Shayra from where he was standing, but he could assume that they were in similar states of shock. Arthur looked incredibly uncomfortable, and Clark had just enough of his wits about him to think, shit, this is going to fuel the rumors about Batman's unrequited pining. After a good 20 seconds of silence, Bruce let out a weak laugh. He had the sense to look appropriately chastised, but that all faded away when he brought the still-rolling camera up to his face and said, "Someone's grumpy." He stopped the video just as Batman lurched forward threateningly. Clark snapped back into action. "Alright, that's enough. Batman, cool off. I'll talk to you about this tomorrow. Bruce, we're going home." He wrapped an arm around the latter's shoulders and practically dragged him out of the door. They walked to the Zeta tubes in silence, and Clark suspected they were both still reeling from Dick's rant. When they arrived back at the Batcave, Clark dropped his arm from Bruce's shoulder and pinched the bridge of his nose. "So, when I said, just so you know, the League thinks Batman is pining after Superman, and we should probably think of a way to change their perceptions of the situation, so that they don't over-dramatize it and make Superman and or Bruce Wayne the bad guy for not considering Batman's feelings. You took that to mean, why don't I ask my son to dress up as me, so that I can orchestrate a meeting between two people who are supposedly in love with the same person, and who famously do not get along, and surely this won't go wrong." "In my defense," Bruce raised a finger, "I didn't think Dick would act like that. I thought we would have a civil conversation and convince everyone we can actually get along." "In your defense, you didn't think Dick would act like Batman?" "Batman can be civil." He handed the phone back and turned away to walk towards the stairs to the manor. "At any rate, I didn't think he'd yell at me." Whoops. That may have been Clark's fault. He went to change out of his suit, pausing only to send the video to Lois and Venmo $150 to Dick. He deserved a little extra after that performance. His phone buzzed repeatedly a few minutes later as he walked into the living room and dropped onto the couch next to Bruce. He took it out of his pocket, seeing a few texts from Lois. Holy shit. Is that Dick? This is the best video ever. Lowest form of shit-eating invertebrate. He's been sitting on that one for a while, huh? This is better than that time Bruce called him a furry. Dick came running up the stairs and jumped over the back of the couch to land perfectly perched on the coffee table. Clark would always be jealous of the flexibility of that kid. He wasn't even a kid anymore. And that made it even worse. Bruce grinned at him, grabbing his money clip and counting out 5 $100 bills. Then he paused, seemed to deliberate over it a bit more, then counted out another 5. He handed them over and asked, "This is why you're my favorite kid." Clark didn't need super hearing to hear the screeches of outrage that came from the kitchen where the rest of the kids were hanging out. Chapter 4. It hurt. It hurt. Everything fucking hurt. This wasn't supposed to happen. Superman! Superman! Who was that? Why was it so dark? What happened? Superman! Clark! Fuck! That voice. He knew that voice. It was right there. Who was it? It was bright. Too bright. He tried to close his eyes, but something was holding them open. Clark, baby, please. Bruce? Honey, I'm gonna get you home. You're gonna be okay. He squeezed his eyes closed, the fingers holding them open, retreating to grasp his face. He blinked his eyes back into focus and was met with Bruce's distraught face. That's it, baby. I got you. Babe? He rasped out. Yeah, babe, I'm here. Alfred's coming with the car. You'll be okay. What happened? You got into a fight and were shot with kryptonite bullets. The League's here and everyone's safe. But I couldn't get to you in time, baby. I'm so sorry. Bruce's whole body was tense, his eyes watery with unshed tears. Clark tried to reach his hand up to hold his wrist and reassure him that everything was okay. But the moment he twitched his arm, he was suddenly made aware of the level of intense pain he was in. Searing, white-hot agony shot through his body. It felt like nothing he'd ever felt before, and he wished more than anything that he could go back to the state of shock he'd been in earlier, where everything was fuzzy and unfocused. He was distantly aware of the scream that ripped out of him before the darkness brought him under once more. It was quiet. He couldn't hear anything but a muted beeping and a faint buzzing. Too bright. He could see the light even through his eyelids and flinched away from it. Where was he? He flexed his hand, feeling another hand wrapped around it. Bruce. The light seemed to be getting brighter the more aware he was of it, so he squeezed his eyes tighter. B? He tried, although it came out as a rasp. He coughed. That got Bruce to jolt. His hand tightened over Clark's. Clark, holy fuck, baby, are you okay? His voice was rough. From sleep or from crying, he wasn't sure. Clark tried to draw in a breath, but it caught in his throat, and he coughed again. Here, water, honey, open your mouth. Something prodded at his lips, and he sighed in relief as he sucked up room-temperature water from a straw. He wet his lips and cleared his throat once he drank enough, feeling slightly better than he had a few minutes ago. Clark, can you open your eyes? Too Brad, he whispered. Oh, shit, Bruce said, and Clark felt the light dim and move away from his face. What about now? He opened his eyes slowly, blinking away the spots in his vision. The first thing he saw was Bruce, standing next to the bed he was on, and gripping his hand like he couldn't bear to let go. He was dressed in sweatpants and one of Clark's old hoodies, and he somehow looked like he both just woke up from hibernation and hadn't been able to sleep for weeks. He looked around, recognizing the unmistakable surroundings of the Batcave. The sun lamp that was set up above him, buzzing away, still too bright for Clark to look at comfortably. The med bay he was in was clean, no evidence of an operation happening recently. Clark was pretty sure that was what must have happened, anyway. What he wasn't sure of was what exactly he'd done to land himself in here. What happened? You got hurt. You went to go run surveillance on something that was happening in Metropolis, but they knew you were coming. They had kryptonite bullets, and you were shot 3 times, and if I hadn't been in that fucking meeting, I would have gotten to you sooner. Clark gripped his hand tighter, and he took a breath, squeezing his eyes shut. When he opened them again, he lifted a corner of his mouth in a wry grin. You managed to call the League before you passed out, and they called Batman. But I didn't have time to change into the suit, so I went to get you as Bruce. I think the jig is up. He chuckled wetly, bringing the hand that was braced on Clark's shoulder up to swipe at his eyes. God, I was so scared, Clark. He collapsed onto the chair behind him and leaned forward to rest his forehead on their entwined hands. I'm okay. You saved me, Clark reassured him. I'm gonna be okay. You better, Bruce whispered. How long has it been? 5 days. Bruce choked out. You might not have your powers back for a while. The kryptonite took a lot out of you. It was in your body for way too long. 5 days, he echoed. Shit. Bruce, I'm so sorry. His husband raised his head to squint at him. Why? I didn't mean to scare you. I'm so sorry. I thought I could do the job myself, and I didn't know. Shut up. Rude. You couldn't have known. Don't blame yourself. I won't if you don't. Bruce shut his mouth with an audible click. Bingo. You couldn't have known either, so stop blaming yourself. Bruce tensed up. But if I had just gotten to you sooner. How? You were stuck in a meeting. A meeting that I scheduled. I set it up knowing that you were going on a potentially dangerous mission, and... It was surveillance, B. If Bruce had been less distressed, he would have gotten mad at Clark for cutting him off so much. So it was a testament to how out of sorts he was that he kept letting it slide. If you don't do any work any time I'm going out on a mission, even if it's a simple surveillance job, you wouldn't get anything done ever. You and I both had no idea this one would go wrong. So it's not your fault. Bruce slumped forward again, this time resting his temple on Clark's hip so he could watch his face. Then he reached over and dimmed the sun lamp a bit more, making the light more bearable for both of them. We can argue about this some more later, he grumbled. Clark hummed, tired enough that he was willing to let it go for now. He closed his eyes and said, Tell me about how the Brucie thing's going. Bruce let out a huff and pressed a kiss to his fingers. Sure you don't want to sleep? No, I want to hear you talk. Fine. but you should get some rest after. Nothing much has happened, to be honest. Haven't seen any of the League since you got hurt. They tried to bring you up to the Watchtower to get you healed up, but I didn't let them. They were arguing that the Watchtower had better equipment. He scoffed, as though I don't have the best equipment to treat my husband. I didn't leave any room for debate, though, and I think they realized it was better to let you go with me than let you bleed out more. I've been sending Diana updates on your condition, and she's been passing them on. But yeah, the Brucie thing. Don't know if anyone knows Batman and Bruce Wayne are the same person, but I think they might have figured it out. They were all confused when I showed up, and Batman didn't. And Batman hasn't been up to the Watchtower since. He let out a sharp exhale. I'll probably have to tell everyone who I am now. Clark opened his eyes again, squinting against the light that his eyes had to readjust to. You okay with that? Bruce shrugged a shoulder. That was the endgame anyway, when I started this whole thing. I just wanted to have as much fun with it as I could before then. Even when you came in and sat on my lap? Clark huffed. Especially then. Bruce grinned at him. Imagine everyone's faces when they look back on that and realize it was Batman. Oh God. A few days later, after Clark had regained the majority of his powers, they zated up to the Watchtower. Batman had been up there a few times since he'd woken up, just to check on things. He hadn't revealed his identity yet, and they'd agreed to wait until the next League meeting, so that everyone could be there. So that you only have to do it once? Clark had asked. So that I can see everyone's brains melting in tandem. Bruce had replied. They sat down at the empty table, not talking. They didn't need to. They'd spent hours planning this, Bruce going over contingency after contingency. Clark found it funny that he had made fun of Clark's anxiety about his reveal, but was now being 10 times worse than he ever was. People trickled slowly into the room, greeting Clark and checking up on him, before taking their seats and chatting away to whoever was next to them. Batman waited patiently until the hour changed. Then he stood up and cleared his throat. This meeting will be starting now. It is unfortunate that so many seats are empty. I would hope that everyone would arrive on time next week, although I do understand when I'm asking too much from a group of highly trained and supposedly disciplined adults. Clark rolled his eyes and settled in for a long 2 hours. By the time Bruce put his bat tablet down and did his standard end-of-meeting spiel, something announcements and action items, something immediate attention. Clark usually zoned out the moment the bat tablet met the table. Everyone was ready to get the hell out of this room and do literally anything else. Clark felt the same, honestly. League meetings were never the most exciting thing. Understatement of the century. But last week's meeting had been cancelled because Superman couldn't make it, and this week's was extra long to make up for everything they'd missed. Even though Bruce was trying to speed through things as fast as he could, either to get his reveal sooner, or because even he wasn't immune to the torment of a long meeting. It had still taken almost 3 hours to get through it all. Before I dismiss you, I have one more announcement. Barry, who had already pushed his chair back so that he could speed out of the room, the moment Batman gave the go-ahead, made a choked-off sound that could have been a sob if it had spent a few more seconds in the oven. A little over 3 months ago, Superman made the decision to share his identity with us. After much deliberation, I have decided to do the same, in the name of trust and transparency. Trust and transparency, his ass. Bruce would have gladly kept going as long as he could have, if Clark hadn't gotten injured. You all understand the weight of this decision, and I trust this information will not be shared anywhere outside of this Watchtower. If it is, I will find out who leaked it, and I have all the information I need to destroy each and every one of you completely. The entire table was staring at him with wide eyes, with the exception of Diana, who had propped a hand up on the arm of her chair to cover her smile, and Jean, who looked like he really couldn't care less. Batman, with all the gravity of a man being forced to show his hand early, and who was doing all he could to squeeze the last dredges of satisfaction out of the situation he was in, reached up, slowly, gripped his cowl, and pulled it off. The room went deadly silent. Even Clark, with his super hearing, could only pick up shallow breathing, pounding of hearts, and the click of someone's throat as they swallowed. Ollie's face went white. Hal's face was red. Wally's face was green. And honestly, at this rate, who needed Christmas decorations? Bruce stood at the head of the table, grinning smugly down at them all. Barry was the first one to recover. Although, maybe recover was too strong a word. You put ice cream in the microwave? Clark threw his head back and cackled. Chapter 5. Bruce glared daggers at Clark as he laughed as if this was the funniest shit he'd heard in a decade. Bruce had been spending the last decade doing whatever he could to make Clark laugh, so excuse him if he didn't appreciate being usurped. Clark was wrong, anyway. He had eaten ice cream, normally, exactly one time since they'd met. It had been on their 4th date, and they'd gone for a stroll in Russell Park, which was about 7-minute walk from the Daily Planet, and Clark had gotten chocolate ice cream for them, and it had cost $4.60. Normal chocolate ice cream. That was cold. And Bruce had eaten it because he had been head over heels for this man already, and he wasn't going to let his dislike for ice cream mess this up for him. And sure, that had been the first and last time he'd eaten ice cream normally in over a decade. But Clark had accused him of something that wasn't entirely true, and Bruce thought that was quite rude of him. Especially since he was still laughing at Barry's not joke. It hadn't even been funny. Bruce turned his deadly back glare onto Barry, and watched in satisfaction as he shrank back. Wait. Oliver said, eyes squeezed shut, and 2 fingers pointed straight up in the air. Clark's snickers died down, but there was still a huge grin on his stupid face. Oliver opened his eyes and stared at Bruce with the most appalled face he'd ever seen on him. Brucie? But you're Brucie. You can't be. You aren't pot kettle. But I know you. And I know you too. What's your point? You're telling me that this whole time you've known who I am and you've said nothing? What was I supposed to say? By the way, you need to work on your poker face. When you saw Clark at that baby shower, your jaw nearly detached from your face, and it would have been miserable to explain if it had splashed into your champagne. Clark chuckled, and see, Barry? Don't even think about stealing Bruce's crown for who can make Clark laugh the most. Oh my god, the baby shower! Dinah muttered into her hands. That was Batman! I teased Batman about how much he hated being there. I told Shirley MacKinnon to keep inviting Batman to events like that. Yeah, thanks for that. Bruce grumbled, even though he'd never really been annoyed with her. It was all Clark's doing. Bruce had begrudgingly broken his silent treatment when they got home that night, but only because Clark, and Clark's tongue, made for a very good negotiator. I'm so sorry, Dinah was saying. Don't be. Clark laughed. He's not mad at you. Bruce was affronted. How dare he give away all of Batman's deepest and darkest secrets? That's a bold statement. You're not even mad at me. It's very hard to be mad at you. That's such a lie. And, okay, yeah, they got into arguments all the time. Both serious and stupid. But Bruce wouldn't have it any other way. Well, it's very hard to stay mad at you. That might be the nicest thing you've ever said to me. You cried during my vows. You cried during serendipity. I'm ignoring you. Bruce turned away from him to reinforce that point, and was met with the wide eyes of the entire league. You cried during serendipity? Barry whispered. Bruce jabbed a finger in his direction. You, shut up. You have emotions? Wally said, in almost the exact same tone as Barry did. Oh, come on. Bruce was never going to get his cool and mysterious persona back, and it was all Clark's fault. I'm kicking every Flash out of the league, effective immediately. He thumped a fist down on the table, like it was a judge's gavel. Maybe he should get a gavel. Wouldn't that be fun? He should look into that. I thought this wasn't a dictatorship, Clark joked. It is now. Shayra cut in before Clark could retort. Kicking Barry and Wally out of the league aside, although I do think that might be a great idea. You're Bruce Wayne? Haven't they established this already? Yes. And Bruce Wayne has been coming to the Watchtower for the past few months. Finally someone mentioned it. Yes, I have. Honestly, He'd done all of that for the sole purpose of messing with the League, and annoying Clark, but that was just a fun side effect, and it had taken them ages to bring it up. And you sat in Superman's lap. Bruce couldn't help the salacious smirk that crept up on his face. It is a very nice lap. They both ignored the gagging that came from Hal's direction, as Shayra said, "You brought cupcakes into the monitor room and started a food fight. And then I made you all clean up every crevice of that room, top to bottom. Yes." "Wait!" Barry shouted. Bruce barely held in the groan that threatened to make its way out of his mouth. This guy again? Didn't Bruce kick him out of the League? Who was Batman? What? Bruce stared. God, Barry might just be dumber than he gave him credit for. Me. No. I know that much. Okay, good. Or else he would have been incredibly concerned. I mean, who was Batman a couple of weeks ago, when you two were both in the Watchtower? Oh, my son. Our son. Nightwing. Oh my god! Nightwing's your son? Wally breathed. You knew this. Well, yeah, but I didn't think you were, like, a normal family. Oh, trust me, Wally. Clark interjected. They're anything but normal. Bruce glared at him. You're part of the family too, asshole. I'm arguably the most normal one out of all of us. He was probably right, but he did say arguably, and that was pretty much a guaranteed way of getting Bruce to argue. What about Dick? I said arguably. Exactly. You said arguably. Clark rolled his eyes, but let it go. Pity. He might have to rehash this when they got home. I just have one more question. Bruce turned to Hal, concerned at how calm those words were spoken. Okay. Hal leaned forward slowly, steepling his fingers under his nose. Bruce exchanged a glance with Clark, and couldn't help but feel apprehensive. Are you as good as they say? Oh my god, Hal! Clark whispered in horror, sinking into his seat. Bruce paused and looked over at his husband's red face. Then he smirked. Well, Clark never had any complaints. Oh my god, Bruce! You're still such a prude. Bruce grinned. 10 years of being with me. I just don't feel like we need to discuss our activities with our coworkers. Our sex life? Clark buried his face in his hands and slid so far down his chair that he was almost falling off of it. I'm not here, he grumbled. I'm ignoring everyone at this table. Diana cleared her throat politely. Except Diana. Thank you. She smiled. Well, I, for one, am very happy for you both. And I am even happier that you felt comfortable enough sharing this with everyone. Bruce nodded. Thank you, Diana. And I'm sure Clark will thank you too, once he's done wallowing in self-pity and prudishness. Clark floated up from his spiral and sat back down on his chair properly. Thank you, Diana, he said, glaring at Bruce. Bruce just grinned right back at him. Arthur leaned forward in his chair, staring directly at Clark. So? Clark echoed. I was right. About us being married? Yeah. He leaned back again. Bruce flicked his eyes from one to the other and back. Well, wasn't that a thrilling conversation? Shut up, or I'll list out every single embarrassing thing you've ever done. I have so many stories. Clark threatened. You wouldn't. Bruce growled. Clark just raised an eyebrow. Wally gasped, and Bruce wanted to tackle him to the ground. Wait, I need this now. You can't just say that and not give us embarrassing Batman stories. Clark. Clark smiled at him innocently. There was that time you got a paper cut and whined about it for 2 days. God damn it. Okay, they were doing this. Paper cuts are painful. You'd never know, Mr. Invincible. And that time you almost set my apartment on fire trying to make pancakes. That was not my fault. That was your shitty apartment's shitty stove's fault. And that time you locked yourself in our room for 3 days straight because Damien brought bunnies home and you were terrified of them. They stared at me weirdly. They were bunnies, V. They had those beady eyes. They were up to no good. They were Damien's bunnies, Bruce. Of course they were up to no good. And that... well, Bruce couldn't argue with that. So he just let out an eloquent, I knocked on the door once, and you asked me if it was a bunny. The moment evil bunnies take over the world, I'm saying, I told you so. I look forward to it, Clark said dryly. And then, there was that time that you... Clark, Bruce cut in sweetly. Love of my life, sun to my moon, ye to my haw. Shut the hell up. Clark shut his mouth, and Bruce nodded, and turned back to the rest of the league, who were staring at them like they were witnessing a particularly hilarious tennis match. Bruce drew a breath in to say something cool and hopefully regain some semblance of his dignity and authority. But before he could do that, remember that time you said yee-haw in front of my parents and Clark? You know what's annoying? Bruce asked as they cuddled up in bed that night. None of them figured out who I was when you were hurt. Which means... Yeah? I could have kept the bit going for way longer. Bruce was sure he could have heard Clark's answering groan all the way over in Metropolis. Notes. I was writing this when I should have been studying for midterms. Whoops. But we're done. I hope I did Bruce's POV justice. He was actually really fun to write. If Bruce could go back in time and change one thing, he'd land outside of the Kent farmhouse 9 years in the past and punch young Bruce in the mouth before he could blurt out yee-haw to his future in-laws. He recognizes how his other mistakes have helped him and the people around him change and mature. But there was absolutely no reason for him to say that, and it has not helped him grow as a person. Thank you very much. I got the headcanon that Bruce remembers every detail of their dates, from K-Flap, Batman in Lingerie, Fic, Lousy Smarch Weather. Great read. I highly recommend. Also, I think it's fitting that we started and ended with someone wanting to tackle Wally during their identity reveal. That's just the Wally West effect. If you enjoyed this work, you can go down to the description below and follow the link to the author's original work. Leave them many, many comments and kudos. If you enjoyed my reading, you can subscribe if you want, or go down to the comments below and tell me what else I should read. I'll talk to the author and see if they're cool with it. Thank you for listening. Clark's reveal. I need to show the League that I trust them with more than just work, so I'll tell them my identity because I know that'll mean a lot to them. Bruce's reveal. Okay, but listen how funny it would be if I fuck with everyone beforehand.